5 seconds of B-roll on one of my last videos got a lot of attention. I was just doing stiff leg deadlifts with my usual pristine form. I don't see a lot of people in the gym training their hamstrings in this way, and I know exactly why. It takes a lot of mental discipline to take my RDL close to failure. Every time I pull up to the gym to do this exercise, I'm genuinely terrified. But if you've got the cojones, I'm gonna show you how to execute this exercise so you can get the biggest legs possible and get really fucking strong in the process. The type of movement I'm gonna talk about, I refer to it as a pure hinge because you're truly taking your quads out of the movement to annihilate your posterior chain, made up of your hamstrings, glutes, and low back. There are 3 things that differentiate a pure hinge from the regular RDLs and stuff that you'll see in the gym. You use less knee bend, you go down lower, and you go down slower. These 3 form fixes are enough to turn a mediocre exercise into a glute and ham killer. By using less knee bend, you focus on the posterior chain. I prefer to have my knees basically straight. You can see that my form is a wedge. I'm basically just wedging the weight up and down. Some people, especially a lot of girls, like to bend their knees more to target the glutes. I find that doing it my way stimulates the glutes plenty. As you can see, I do have a bakery back there, so I'm sure you'll be fine too. Go down lower. This gives you more of all the good stuff. More hamstring stretch, more glute stretch, more low back stimulus because you have to maintain position at the bottom. Finally, control the way down, especially at the very bottom where you get the most stimulus. I'm not saying you have to do robot reps, but the bar should definitely be slowing down as you reach the floor. These 3 factors will allow you to get a crazy mind-muscle connection and pump. If you're doing RDLs and you don't really feel it that much, this will change that for you. The benefits, as I stated, are crazy growth in your posterior chain, but also in your upper back and your lats. These are secondary muscles that get worked as you resist the urge to let your back round and let the bar get out in front of you. The main reason I do them is to increase my deadlift strength. If you care about your squat or deadlift, having a big, strong posterior chain can only benefit you. The biggest predictor of your strength is the amount of muscle you have in the relevant areas. They're also easier to recover from because you're using less weight overall. I can do heavier RDLs with over 400 pounds, but they will be harder to recover from while giving me arguably a worse stimulus. There's a whole bunch of exercise variations you can use to get a pure hinge. It's not just RDLs, but of course that's where we're gonna start. If you are flexible, then you can do your RDLs off of a deficit like I do. You will know you're going low enough if your back is approaching parallel or going lower. You can also use 25-pound plates instead of a deficit. A lot of people like doing dumbbell RDLs. I think they're okay. You just want to make sure that they're in front of you rather than by your sides, because keeping them by your sides mimics a trap bar and will de-emphasize the posterior chain. After doing them for a while, you might be forced to switch to a barbell anyways because they don't go heavy enough. The 100-pound dumbbells in my gym are way too light for me now, so if you're new or if your gym has relatively heavy dumbbells, then these are a good option. Snatch grip RDLs are really great. The nice thing about these is that they also really fry your upper back. Because your grip is so wide, you have to use a lot of extra lats to keep the bar close to you. I actually get a lat pump from this exercise. Stiff leg deadlifts are basically the same thing as RDLs, except you bring the bar to a full rest on the floor. I like these because they're a little bit more specific for strength. I will start my sets by just barely resting the bar on the floor and exploding up. But as I get tired, I will do a full reset and just bang out a couple more reps. These can also be done with a snatch grip as well. Good mornings are an extremely underrated exercise and can be great if you do them in this pure hinge style. I like high bar good mornings with a pad. The reason for the pad is to put the bar as high up on your traps as possible to worsen your leverages and make the lift harder. Good mornings with a low bar placement are also great. You'll be much stronger at these. I also like doing them with an SSB. This gets a lot more upper back involved, and also a Smith machine is really good too. The final exercise variation is the back extension. I like doing these either with lighter weight on my back for high reps, or heavier weight using a snatch grip for lower reps. There are some important cues to remember when doing a pure hinge. It's not as simple as just going lower. What you don't want to do is focus so much on range of motion that you end up bending your knees or rounding your lower back. This is you compensating for the fact that you're not flexible enough. Go down as far as you can while keeping straight knees and a tight back. Once you can't maintain that, you know that you found your maximum range of motion. As you do this more and more, you'll be able to go down lower. Just take your time and don't rush. If you can only go to your knees with good form, then that qualifies as a pure hinge for you. All of the movement should be coming about the hips. Absolutely no energy leakage in the knees or lower back. You'll also want to push your ass as far back as you can. By pushing your butt back, you stretch the hamstrings from this end. By keeping your knees straight, you stretch your hamstrings from the other end. Stretching your hamstrings is really good for growth. Arch your lower back slightly, as if you were about to twerk. This anterior pelvic tilt will pre-stretch the hamstrings, and you'll feel them that much more. As you get more and more tired throughout your set, your instinct will be to speed up or loosen the form. You must not do this. The last 2 or 3 reps are the most stimulating. So as you get more tired, you need to dial in. This is what makes pure hinges so hard. If you don't have the coordination to do RDLs, I will lay out a beginner progression. Start with the kettlebell deadlift. You can do these off blocks to start. Focus on bending at the hips and keeping a neutral spine. Lower the kettlebell over time until you can do it off of a deficit. At this point, you can switch to back extensions. Start the back extensions going to about parallel, maybe a little bit lower, keeping your knees straight and your back tight. Over time, build the strength and flexibility to do lots of reps at a deep range of motion. At this point, you can try out RDLs with an empty bar and then slowly begin adding weight. You might think that using this form is dangerous and that going too low is guaranteed to give you back pain. I will agree that this is higher risk, but if you're not a dumbass, you can mitigate the risk. If I wanted to get injured, here's what I would do. I wouldn't warm up properly, I would go as heavy as possible, and I would give no real thought to bracing. You are not a dumbass. You're going to take your time with the warm-up, especially with a movement like this. My first set with the empty bar always feels like garbage. My hamstrings are tight, my lower back is tight, I can't really get into a good position. When I come back to the empty bar again, for my next warm-up, I always feel better. Here's an example warm-up if I was working up to 3 plates. Anytime you switch to a new variation of a movement, you want to lower the weight by 10 to 20%. It's not worth it to go heavier and risk injury in your first session. You can always go heavier next time if it's too light. If I was a dumbass, I would also be really loose with my bracing. You need to pay special attention to this. Even if your movement looks good on the outside, if you're not actively and consciously bracing, you can still get low back pain. Your head to your hips should function as a rod with absolutely no give. You should just be wedging the weight up and down, like I mentioned earlier. In a pure hinge, you're getting more out of less weight, but I still never take these completely to failure. Training legs is hard, man. Especially if you get relatively strong, these can be super brutal. So I always leave 1 to 3 reps in reserve. I love lower reps for these kinds of movements. My favorite ranges are 5 to 8 and 6 to 10. But you can go more than that, 12, 15 plus. But to be honest, that's just too painful. I'd rather stick to low reps. If I was training for well-rounded legs, I might put this as a secondary lift on a heavy squat day. My personal program consists of 3-week waves, where I do snatch grip stiff leg, deficit RDL, and then just regular stiff leg deadlifts. I only return to the same lift after I've done the full 9 weeks, and I add anywhere from 5 to 20 pounds. But this is more advanced programming. I will go into more depth about this when I deadlift 600 pounds. Hopefully that should be soon. A good standard to aim for is 3 plates on a stiff leg deadlift for 8 reps. When I deadlifted 550, I was able to do 370 for 8 reps, so 315 should put you at around 200 kilos, 440 deadlift. This video is all about leg training, but should you even train your legs at all? I go into that in this video.